What is wrong with the weather? You have to have blinders on not to at least be asking the question. Every few weeks, it seems, the earth unleashes unprecedented fury of another sort. One week, the earth is jolted by a powerful earthquake or an outbreak of tornadoes. The next week, it's devastated by a hurricane or tsunami. We've been pounded by unprecedented flooding in one area and oppressive drought in another. Are these so-called natural disasters mentioned in Bible prophecy? And if so, what is the meaning behind these earth-shaking events?
The Philadelphia Church of God presents the Trumpet Daily.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Trumpet Daily. If you study the Bible honestly and with an open mind, you will clearly see that God created this earth for the purpose of mankind's individual and collective physical, mental, and spiritual development. In Genesis 2:15, God gave Adam the responsibility to dress and keep the Garden of Eden. He was called to be a farmer, and like farmers today, Adam understood that the weather sustained his existence. He understood that the weather was a function of God's will and power. In fact, the Bible reveals that God actually uses weather in order to communicate and interact with mankind. Few chapters in the Bible explain this as well as Leviticus 26. In the first 13 verses of the chapter, God outlines the blessings that will come should mankind obey His laws. In this passage, we see that mild, predictable weather patterns are a blessing from God. Then in verse 14, all the way through verse 46, God outlines the curses for disobedience. In Deuteronomy 28, the counterpart to Leviticus 26, God states the weather curses even more specifically. This fundamental principle permeates the Bible. Weather is a measure of God's happiness with mankind. Our free booklet offer for today is titled, Why Natural Disasters? Write down the phone number on your screen right now and make sure you call at the end of this program to request your free copy. We'll put the information up again at the end of the program in case you miss it. The main message for today considers this question: what is wrong with the weather? It's a segment my father recently taped for his weekly program, The Key of David, which plays on nearly 200 television stations worldwide. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Gerald Fleury.
What is wrong with our weather? We have had record-breaking drought, tornadoes, floods. What is wrong? Well, this weather, along with a couple of Bible verses, has shown me something that I have not seen before, and I can see through this weather and through a couple of verses in the Bible that I'll show you that I know exactly where we are in Bible prophecy, and you can see that from these two scriptures along with the treacherous weather that we're all experiencing. All you have to do is take a couple of verses from Matthew 24 along with all of this devastating weather that we've seen, especially in America, but in other nations as well, and you can see, precisely where we are in Bible prophecy. And that's critical to all of us. If you want to know where we are, then you just take note of what I'm saying here, and I think you will see it very clearly just by understanding a couple of verses and everything that is happening with the weather in this land. It's something that we all should be interested in, and we have a new booklet on the weather conditions that we'll tell you about at the end of this program, and we'll hope to send that to you as well to explain all these things in detail. But notice what it says in Matthew 24 and verse 3. And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the sign of your coming and of the end of the world, or of this age? the age of man ruling man. We're about to enter into a new age. That's what these prophecies are all about. The signs in the Bible are to be read. A sign points us to something we really need to understand. And I think that's pretty clear to all of us. The bad news that we see in the weather is a sign, along with other events in the world, but a big focus is on the weather. And this savagely destructive weather is a sign as a part of the countdown to Jesus Christ's return. So you can see there's a lot of good news here. And let me tell you, that bad weather is not caused by global warming. It's something far more serious than that. And I'll show you why. Notice verse 6 of Matthew 24, "And you shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass. But the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in different places." Famines. Now I'll tell you, verse 7 is what really stunned me when I thought about this in the context of the weather that we're experiencing. Famines, of course, it's talking about war, and we know that famines come from war, and you think about that as being mainly what it's talking about here, but we have to remember also that famines or famine comes from floods and droughts and tornadoes as well. And that's what we need to understand. And we have experienced all these record-breaking events in the weather, and God says it has something that we need to understand about this end time. The word famine can also be defined, and is defined, one definition, a scarcity of harvest. Well, have you noticed about all of the news and what this is doing to our crops in America? And in other nations like Canada and Australia, they have their problems with, especially with floods, very serious problems. So we have these famines, and then another rather stunning insight into this was when I looked at the word pestilences. Of course, that's diseases that follow in the wake of these floods and tornadoes and droughts. But if you look in the book of Acts, that same word for pestilences is used for a pestilent fellow. And that adds a dimension to this prophecy and says, well, look, when you have all of these famines or famine in the land, it's also going to cause a social breakdown if it gets worse, and it's prophesied to get a lot worse before it gets better. So I think you need to look at that closely, and so do I. After all, these are Christ's own words. They're in red letter. The whole chapter of Matthew 24 is in red letter, almost all of it. And of course, a true Christian is one who follows Jesus Christ and follows what He says. So this has to be a critical understanding for us. And Matthew 24 being the largest single chapter of prophecy in all the Bible, we'd better take note of what Christ says about this end time. And it is specifically for this end time. The end of the age, that's what He's talking about. And the end of a new age when Jesus Christ has to return and restore order Himself and rule man, because man simply cannot rule himself. But notice verse 8. Verse 8, all these are the beginning of sorrows. So where are we in prophecy? Well, we're at the beginning of sorrows, the very beginning. You see, it's going to get much worse, and we're at the beginning of it. Now, if you don't believe God, if you don't believe the Bible, all you have to do is, get a focus on the beginning and see if it doesn't intensify. Now, you can be protected from it. I can be, for the most part, we can all be protected from it if we trust in God. You individually can. It is an individual matter with all of us. But we do have to do what God tells us to do, because He is working now to get the attention of America and the world. And you're going to see that, and you can see it through all of these prophecies. God wants our attention. There's something that's terribly wrong in this world, and He wants our attention. Notice what the Anchor Bible says about the beginning of sorrows. Literally, it means the beginnings of birth pains. The beginnings of birth pain. It has almost a technical term for the sufferings which would immediately precede a new age, the age of the Messiah's reign. See, the commentaries see that. But this is the beginning of birth pangs, or pangs, either one. And God gives us a picture of a woman here giving birth to a child, and you have these labor pains before the child is born. And so the whole world has to go through some birth pains. We give birth to this new age where Jesus Christ will rule, and we'll never have to worry about those terrible, terrible and horrific trials and tribulations that we're talking about here. We won't have to experience that anymore. But God wants us to be warned, but He also wants us to realize that we're on a countdown. When you see that we're in the beginning of these birth pains or the beginning of sorrows, we're on a countdown to the return of Jesus Christ to this earth. And that's the best possible news this world could ever hear. Let me give you, I have to give you a few quotes from the news so that you understand more specifically what I'm talking about. I think most of you have seen all of these devastating weather events, but let me just read to you a few of them to try to give you a picture of what is really happening here. Here's one from the Reuters, May the 11th this year, and it says the swollen Mississippi River has broke an all-time record level. There's another record broken. What is going on? And that was at Natchez, Mississippi. And then they said it was even to get worse, and it's all been the result of weeks of rain and then an unusually snowy winter. That's why it is all that water is there. Here's one from CNN Money, May 11th. They wrote that the Arkansas Farm Bureau says more than 1 million acres of cropland are underwater. That is expected to cause at least $500 million in damage, including the loss of crops that were already planted and future losses. And of course, the receding of the water is weeks away. And in Arkansas alone, there have been thousands of acres of soybean and winter wheat crop that are also expected to be lost. I mean, they can't even calculate the cost on much of this right now. And the article is concluded by saying the flooded land could deal a devastating blow not just to farmers but to the entire state. Agriculture is Arkansas's biggest industry, accounting for $16 billion of its economy. And Veach expects the effects of the flooding to be felt for years to come. That's a shortage of food for years to come.